today's not Kuf Vav, it's Kuf Yudalit. We concluded yesterday with the discussion of making an assessment of the borrower to determine how much he should be able to retain in order to continue to be able to survive. And the point is that we had derived that from the law of Erechin, from the law that's covered at the very end of Sefer Vayikra, where one makes a commitment to donate their value to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, there are two different ways that one can donate one's value to the Beit HaMikdash. One is to sort of donate their actual value as a slave, and that's not the Erechin situation. But then the second way is to sort of donate their sort of generic value, where one commits to contribute the amount that a typical person of that person's age and gender would contribute. And so those are the two methods. And when we talk about the second of those methods, the Erechin method, so then we said that if somebody is particularly poor, they only have to pay what they can afford after their necessities have been determined by the Kohen, and so that we're trying to ask the question, sort of, to what extent do we do the same thing for a borrower as well, not just somebody who's made the commitment to the Beit HaMikdash. So the Gemara again picks up to understand what this assessment process is. We're now on the second line of Kuf Yudalet Amud Aleph. My apologies for getting us a page ahead a moment ago. Okay, so Yibailahu Mahu Shiyasadru Balchov Mi Gamar Micha Micha Me Arachin. So the question is what do we do about whether or not we make this evaluation about a borrower? And the question fundamentally is, do we derive a Gzeira Shava from the word Micha, which is not actually the word, but let's take a look at Rashi, and Rashi will tell us, lo, or do we not? So if we take a look at Rashi, second line, Micha Micha, Gabi Love Umalve, when it comes to a borrower and a lender, Ksiv, V'chia Mocha Chicha, Umateya Doimach, that when your brother is poor, and you stretch out your hand to him. The Gabi Erechin, and when it comes to the mitzvah of Erechin, Ksiv v'im mochahu me'arkecha. If he is poorer, then the evaluation of then the assessment of his value. So we can see in both those contexts that the root mem chaf is memchav hey is the technical root, is used in both. And so the question is do we make a Gzeira Shava to say, just as we create an assessment for a poor person with respect to Erechin, do we do the same thing with respect to a loan? So Tashma, so we're going to try a couple times to prove the answer to this question. And here's our first. Deshalach Ravin ba'agarte. So Ravin sent the following in a letter. Davar zeh sha'alti l'chol rabosai. I asked all my teachers this question. Below amruli davar, and they weren't able to answer it. Baram kach haisa she'ela. But there was another question that was asked, and I think maybe we can answer the question this way. Ha'omer harei alai mana levedek habayit. If somebody says that they're going to give $100 to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash, so Ma'osh Yisadru, do we make an assessment regarding them if it turns out that they can't afford that $100? So Rabbi Yaakov Mishmei Debar Pada, Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishmei De Ilfa Amri. So both Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Kal v'chomer balchov. We can actually derive this from a kal v'chomer, from a regular borrower. Uma balchov shemachzirin ein misadrin, hektish she'ein machzirin, enutin she'ein misadrin. So essentially, Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah assume in their answer that there is no assessment for a loan, and so they say the following: when it comes to a borrower where the lender needs to return the item that the lender takes as security when the borrower needs it, ein misadrin, we don't make an assessment to see whether the borrower can afford the payment that we're taking away from him. Hektish she'ein machzirin, when it comes to hektish, where you donate something to hektish, einotin she'ein misadrin. Well, then, and we don't do any kind of returning. The hektish doesn't give back the item that it takes from as security from you, if it takes security from you in order for you to be able to use it. So it should certainly not have any kind of assessment. So that's proof number one. Rabbi Yochanan Amar neder ke'erka ksiv. And Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what? It's not actually that kal v'chomer that makes it, but rather a neder is like an erkecha, an erech valuation. So my arach and misadrin, av hektish misadrin. So here, this question about whether or not we can evaluate a hektish situation, and whether we do an assessment in a hektish situation can help us, because we end up having this machlokas between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah on the one hand, and Rabbi Yochanan on the other hand. V'idach. So okay, so now what about the other view? Hahu l'nidon b'chvodo hu da'asa. So what do Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah do with this neder ke'erkecha? Neder ke'erkecha is a phrase that's used in the discussion at the end of Sefer Vayikra in connection with Erechin. So what do they do with that juxtaposition? So they use that juxtaposition. It teaches us that the importance of the significance of any particular limb. So what does that mean? Ma arachin nidon b'chvodo. Just as when it comes to arachin, when we estimate somebody's value, we determine it based on the significance of a particular limb. We'll see that in a moment. Hektish nidon b'chvodo. So too, when it comes to hektish, we're going to judge it based on the significance of a particular limb. So that's what Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah do with the neder ke'erchin. So, and let's take a look in Rashi. Rashi really helps us understand what's going on here. So we take a look at Rashi. It's 369. 15 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi, approximately. Hekesh neder le'erchin. That pasuk, again, Sefer in Vayikra, Parak of Zion, pasuk bet, connects nedarim, vows, to erchin, to a promise to pay one's value to the Beit HaMikdash. Lahachi asa. It comes that connection comes in order to teach us the following. She'im amar. If somebody were to say, Demei libi, that the value of my heart, o roshi, o kvedi, or my head, or my what are they called? You have, sorry, I'm forgetting the. I think Kvedim are
liver, the liver.
Liver. Okay. Is it the liver? Yeah. Okay. The liver. A lie. So then, in each of those cases, if you say that you're going to give that piece of your body, that you're going to commit the value of that piece of your body, no tin to make kulo, you effectively end up having to give your entire value, because these are things that you can't live without, And so effectively, you're promising your entire self. Aval im amar al aver she'ein haneshama tluya bo. But if you were to instead reference some limb that your entire existence is not dependent on, damav alai, that's the amount that you owe. Shamano so ke'eved hanimker b'shuk. You evaluate the person as if he's a slave in the marketplace. Kamahu shava biyad, bekamahu shava below yad. How much he's valued with the hand or without a hand, for example. Laha milsa itzrich lemikmar neder me'erichin. And so for this purpose, we need to learn neder from erichin. Gabi erichin ksiv erkacha nefashos. That when it comes to erichin, then it says that it has to be your soul. And so im amar erech aver hashanashama tuluya bo alai, noting to make kula. If you, when it comes to erichin, if you were to make that same vow for your entire, for your head, for your heart, for your liver, then you'd have to pay the whole amount, your entire value, even though you said only part of your body, because that part of your body is determinative of whether you're alive. But if you only promise in an erichin vow your arm or your hand, so lo amar klum, you have not made any commitment whatsoever. She'ein erich kasav elo nefesh, because the concept of erichin only applies to your entire body. It's all or nothing when it comes to erichin. So as a result, so that's what
What's
we
the
would
connection
learn.
to Neder then? I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
he's talking about Erichin. The
I'm
Eric,
sorry. I don't understand. Say it again.
he's
I
talking
thought
about Eric.
for some reason my headphones are not working, so I apologize.
He's talking about Erichin for the Beit HaMikdash. What's the connection to Neder here?
The connection to Nether is precisely the whole point. The fact is that the second pasuk in Parak of Zion has the word Neder Neder Be'erkecha. So that juxtaposition of those two words tells us that there's got to be a connection between Nedarim, vows, and Erech valuation promises. So those two things are connected. So Rabbi Yochanan wanted to connect them to say that we make an assessment for both of them. Whereas Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah said we don't make an assessment because we learn it from a Kal V'chomer from loans that we don't make an assessment. And so as a result, given that we don't make an assessment, what do they do with the Neder Ke'erkacha? Neder Be'erkacha, excuse me. So they say Neder Be'erkacha tells us that just as Erech, we focus on whether a limb, it means your entire life. And if it does, then the Erech and vow applies. So too, when you make a neder to commit to give something to the Beis Hamikdash, to give a hektish to the Beis Hamikdash, if you commit a particular limb, we value whether the limb is determinative of your life. If it's determinative of your life, then you have to give your entire value. If not, then we value it as if you are missing it as a slave. And so that's the process that we do for this. So as a result, that's exactly the whole point, is that we learn these two things have a connection. And the connection is that we're going to judge a person by the value of their limb and whether it's dependent, whether the limb is necessary for somebody to live. So again, so now we have this debate between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah on the one hand, and Rabbi Yochanan on the other hand. So v'yisadru b'valchov. So now, when it comes to a borrower, so let's say that we make an assessment, using a kal v'chomer me'erichin. Let's use the same kind of kal v'chomer that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah tried to use to say that there's no assessment for a borrower in the opposite direction. Ma erichin she'ein machzirin misadrin. When it comes to erichin, we do not return any kind of security to the poor person who's made the vow. And yet, misadrin, we make an assessment. Balchov shemachzirin. When it comes to a borrower who does who does get back an item of security if he's poor and needs it, well, then we certainly should make an assessment about whether or not the person is poor and can afford the item that you're taking as security or taking as a payment. So the Gemara answers that the reason that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah don't learn the Kal V'chomer that they have in that direction is because of the following: Amar Kra imach hu me'erkacha. The fact is that the Torah tells us that the person who makes the erech and vow, he's the one that has to be poor. Who below balcho? The usage of the word who is not, which is not really necessary, because it could just say the imach me'erkacha if the person is, because the who is implied in the verbs in Hebrew. So if it would imply if he's too poor for the erech amount, and the fact that we say who, that comes to limit it. So we limit it only to erech and vow makers and not to borrowers. Okay, V'idach. So once we have the fact that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah are using the word who to limit and to prevent this Kal V'chomer in this direction, V'idach, what do the others do? What does Rabbi Yochanan do with the word who? Hi ad sheyehe b'malchuso mitchilaso v'ad sofo. So what Rabbi Yochanan would do, he says that it tells us that unless the person is poor from the very beginning of the process until the end of the process, we won't necessarily do the assessment. Meaning, if John makes a vow that he's giving his value to the Beis Hamikdash, and he was poor at the beginning of the process, and then he got, he inherited a lot of money, and so now he can afford to make the payment, even though at the beginning when he made the vow, you might have thought, oh, he was poor, so he was only committing to contribute a lesser amount. No, tough luck. He got rich at the end. And so now that he's paying the vow, he has to pay the full amount of the erech and vow. He doesn't get any discount for having vowed later, having vowed when he was poor.
So he wins the lottery, he has to pay a different amount then?
Correct. The Erichin, as we see at the end of Sefer Vayikra, if you are poor, you don't pay the same amount as if you're wealthy. And so even though he was poor when he made the vow, if he became wealthy, as you said, he won the lottery, he would have to pay the greater amount of being a wealthy person, not of being a poor person. So now the question is, Gemara wonders, why don't we reverse the Kal V'chomer to teach that there's an obligation to return the security taken for an erech debt, meaning that if somebody commits to do an erech and vow and he doesn't pay up, and so the Beis Hamikdash takes a security from him to guarantee that he'll make the payment. So maybe we should actually do some kind of return of that item when the person needs it because he's poor. Let's say that the Kal V'chomer is as follows: that when it comes to a normal borrower for whom we do not do an assessment, so as a result, but yet we require the lender to give back the security to the borrower if he's poor. Well, then for Erichin, where we do an assessment and we don't just take everything away from the one who makes the Erichin vow, we should certainly return an item to the poor person if we take a security. So that's the question that we're asking. So Kal V'chomer mibal chov, making a Kal V'chomer from a borrower. Uma bal chov she'ein mesadrin. When it comes to a bal chov, we don't make an assessment yet. Machzirin, we return an item that's been taken of security if the poor person needs it. Hektish and Misadrin, when it comes to Hektish, where we do make an assessment, here we're talking really, when we say Hektish, we mean Erachin, Eino Din Shemachzirin, certainly we should force the person to return it. So the answer is the reason that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah do not make the Kal V'chomer in that direction is because Amar Kra b'shachav b'salma so ve'rachacha, that ve'rachecha, excuse me, that when it comes to the returning of the security, the Torah says that the person, the borrower, is going to sleep in the garment that's going to be returned to you, turn to him, and he's going to bless you, the lender, who returned the security because he needed it. Well, Yatsa Hektish she'ein sarach bracha. Well, God doesn't need any blessing from us. We don't, bless God for having returned anything to us. So therefore, that wouldn't apply. That clause wouldn't apply, and therefore, Hektish doesn't have the application of having to return an item. The low. And second, is it really not true that Hashem doesn't require our blessings? That you should eat, you should be satisfied, and then you bless Hashem. Doesn't that show that we can bless Hashem, and therefore maybe we should again have so as a result, that phrase cannot be used to exclude Hektish, and therefore we should have a Kal V'chomer that tells us that Hektish should return items to a poor person that it's taken as security from a poor person when this poor person needs it. No, it's not that the poor person is going to bless the one who returns it, but rather that should be treated as a charitable act. So that the command to return a security article, that means that it applies only to Mishit Sarach Tzedakah, one who needs charity. Yatsa Hektish she'ein Sarach Tzedakah. So any person could potentially need charity and therefore need to do tzedakah. Hektish has no requirement to do tzedakah, and so as a result, that there is no. That's why Hektish, we won't learn the Kal V'chomer in the other direction. So now we have a very interesting.
The Hektish doesn't require tzedakah, but doesn't the person who gave the item a pledge to Hektish, and he has a mashkanta, doesn't he require the tzedakah? That
Yes,
he doesn't need his garment back at night?
You're absolutely right that he needs tzedakah, but ulecha tiyet tzedakah refers to the lender, not to the borrower. So therefore, we're not focused on the person who owes the money. We're focused on the person who's receiving the money, and ulecha tiyet tzedakah applies only to a lender, not to Hektish. Right? Hektish is the one who receives the money, and the phrase ulecha tiyet tzedakah is going on the person who is owed the money. And so therefore it would have to apply to Hektish, who is owed the money when somebody makes an Erechin vow. And so as a result, since tzedakah doesn't apply to Hektish, therefore that's why we're not going to learn the Kal V'chomer in the opposite direction. But you're absolutely right that the poor person does require tzedakah, but that's not the phrase "Ulecha tiyet tzedakah" is going on the giver of the tzedakah, of the returner of the security, the person who is the lender. And so as a result, just a lender requires tzedakah, the Hektish does not. So now
Hektish is the lender here.
Sorry?
Hektish is the lender.
Hektish is being compared to the lender. That's exactly right. Okay, so Ashkeche Rabbah.
How do we? A person can redeem something from Hektish, right?
Yes.
So if this individual makes a pledge to Hektish, he could choose to redeem the item that he was giving there, or the value that he was giving to Hektish, and then this would come back to him. Right? It's a little different concept, but he would be entitled to receive his item or his pledge back if he were to redeem it in some manner, right?
So what you're highlighting is that is maybe we can make an argument that that hektish is different because there's an opportunity to redeem the item, and therefore maybe we shouldn't make a kal v'chomer from hektish to a loan. Now, I will note that when it comes to the security item itself, the borrower also has that right. Right? The borrower has the right to pay the loan effectively and take back the security. So there is an aspect of the two. Now, you're absolutely right that there are other aspects of hektish. So, for example, when a regular person gives to hektish and then redeems it, they have to add a chomesh. And so that doesn't apply. So, you're asking a good question as to why, can't we argue that maybe this isn't a really good kal v'chomer in the first place? And I don't have a great answer to that. That maybe we could say that that's that we should not, that this is a different kal v'chomer, that that the kal v'chomer isn't a valid one. Although I will note that, remember that our kal v'chomer originated between Erechin and a borrower, and in the situation of Erechin, you don't have that redemption. So if we focus just on the connection between Erechin and a loan, it may be that some of the questions that are coming to us right now wouldn't apply, and the Gemara is just using hektish as a shorthand way of referring to Erechin. So if we think about it from that perspective, I think once again the kal v'chomer would that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah offer would continue to apply. So now we get a wonderful story of Rabba bar Avuha meeting Eliyahu. And obviously you'll see exactly why we're bringing this statement at the very beginning. And indeed, this is this statement seems to undermine our prior discussion. So let's take a look and we'll see. So Ashkei Rabba bar Avuha leEliyahu. That Rabbi bar Avuha happened to find Eliyahu standing in a cemetery of non-Jewish cemetery. Amrlei. So Rabbi bar Avuha asked, Ma'oshi Yisadru b'valchov, do we do an assessment for a borrower? Of course, that was the question that we've been discussing all along, and it would seem like, again, according to Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yirmiyah, we would say no, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, maybe we would say yes. But it seems like the focus of the Gemara was on the no answer, so it would seem like the answer is no. And yet, Amar Le, Gomer Micha Me'archin. We actually he says that Eliyahu responded that we do the derivation of Micha from Erechin, and Gabi Erechin Ksiv B'Machu Merkecha. It's if he's poor from the Erechin amount. Gabi Balchov Ksiv B'Chia Muchachicha. As we turn to Kuf Yud Dalet Amabet. So the answer seems to be that we do assess a debtor. And Tosos here, if we take a look at the beginning of the last Tosos on the Daf, Kuf Yud Dalet, Pasuk Rabbeinu Tam, B'Sefer HaYashar, De'ein Mesadrin, B'Bal Chov. He actually says, even though Eliyahu Hanavi has said we do an assessment, Rabbeinu Tam concludes that we do not. Dehabra b'Shim ben Gabriel demasnisin masik le'el desaver de'ein mesadrin b'balchov. And because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah seems to say that you don't. V'kaimalan halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel b'Mishnah seinu. And we say in general that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnayos. So heicha delo pasuk Gemara keman depligiale, when the Gemara doesn't have somebody with whom it argues. V'lo matzina b'kol amoraim Dishmaisa Shum Amora Shesavar Behedja Shemisadrin. And we found no Amora who says that you make an assessment. So how can we paskin according to Rabbeinu Tam like Eliyahu Hanavi? So V'Rabba bar Avuha Amr Leila Eliyahu Mashi Yisadru. So so how do I understand this Gemara? So when Rabba bar Avuha is asking to Eliyahu whether we do this, whether we make an assessment, and Eliyahu responds that we learn this Gzeira Shava of Micha from Erechin. Nira Rabbeinu Tam says the following: that our girsa should be Menayin shemisadrin lebal chov, kolomer menalin leman de isle misadrin. According to the one who would say that we are a misadrin, how do we know? Bahag, nira. So we'll stop there in the Tosfos, but I thought that was interesting. The vast majority of poskim, my understanding, is say that actually we do an assessment, and when a beis din would take away from somebody who's poor, they would actually make sure the poor person had something to live on. Okay, so let's keep going. So
But
Minayan,
Rabbeinu Tam seems to hold that they don't. They don't make an assessment.
yes, that's exactly right. There's a machlokas between Rabbeinu Tam and other poskim, and I thought that was just an interesting thing that, and you could, get into the discussion of, is this considered, a lo bashamayim situation? Is it not? Some interesting thoughts that you can have on that are, depends on the situation of whether Eliyahu is coming in person or was he an angel. Very interesting discussions that one can have on that, but that's beyond the scope of today's daf. So Menayin la'arom shelo yisrom. How do I know, Rabbi Baravua asks Eliyahu, that a naked person's not allowed to take truma? So Eliyahu explains, Diksiv v'lo yirevecha ervas davar. He shall not see a shameful thing in you. So this teaches that when one's not dressed, when one's naked, one shouldn't be saying a bracha, and as a result, you can't take truma without saying a bracha.
How does they say a bracha in the mikveh?
What?
How does the woman say a bracha in the mikveh?
So the answer to that question, very good question, is that when the water is covering her, so then she's allowed to say a bracha. And so even though on some level you could see, the issue is that it's still considered covered when she's in the water. And the same thing is true for a man. So Amar Le Lav Kohen Humar. Now, the Avow recognizes where they're located, right? They're in a cemetery, a non-Jewish cemetery. And so Eliyahu, aren't you a Kohen? So my taima Kaimar Beves Kvaros. What are you doing in a cemetery? Now, Tosas here asks a great question, because what about the story of Eliyahu rescuing and saving the son of a widow and bringing him back to life? How did he do that if he's a Kohen? So Tosfos answers that actually Eliyahu knew he would be successful, so as a result, it wasn't considered a dead body. But in any event, it's an interesting question. Maybe the question is better than the answer. Amrle lo masli mar taharas. So then Eliyahu respond back. 1 second, don't you know your halachos of taros of what's tahor and what's tameh? The Tanya, we've got a brisa there. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Kivrehen shel ovdei kochavim ein mitamen, that the graves of non-Jewish people don't make somebody tameh. Shene'emar be'etem tzoni tzon umarito adam atem, that you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, you are Adam, meaning that we, the Jewish people, are considered Adam. Atem kruyim Adam. You, the Jewish people, are considered Adam. Ve'ein ovdei kochavim kruyim Adam. And but other non-Jews are not considered Adam. And so, as a result, because of that, and because Adam is the basis for the whole halachot of ki Adam yamut ba'ohel, or something along those lines, so that's the basis for all of taharos, and so tuma and tahara doesn't apply to a non-Jew. So
What do you consider a non-Jew? A behemoth?
No, a non-Jewish person.
So I understand, but if he's Adam refers to an individual, a person, right?
So there are other psukim, and now I understand your question. You're saying, well, what about a dead animal? A dead animal can make somebody tummy. So the pasuk that we're talking about is the pasuk that talks about tumas mace. And of course, remember that when we talk about a kohen not becoming tummy, the prohibition is specifically about tumas mace. So that's point one. And then point number two is there are other psukim in the Torah that say that an animal causes tuma as well. It's just not causing the tumas mace of a human being.
But we're saying if we're calling we use the term Adam to refer to a Jew, isn't a non-Jew also an Adam? Isn't he also a
That's
person?
exactly what what we're learning here is that a non-Jew is not considered not when you see Adam in the Torah, Adam is not does not include non-Jews as well. It only includes Jews. So Amar Lay, and we've seen this drasha a couple of times over the last few years in the Shasta so far. So it's not, but yes, you're absolutely right to ask the question. And certainly, if I were to have answered this on my own, I would have said Adam should include everyone, whereas Ish maybe should not. But no, it's actually the opposite. Ish could potentially includes everyone, whereas Adam does not. Okay, so Amrle Barba. So now Rabbi Abahu, Rabbi Barabahu Avuha, excuse me, is explaining to Eliyahu why he doesn't know this halacha. Barba lo matzinu. Look, I'm Beshita Matzina. I'm barely able to study 4 of the 6 Sdarim of Mishnayos. You want me to know all 6? Amrle v'amai. Why aren't you able to do all 6? Amrle dechikali milsa. I've got to, I'm pretty poor. I need to work financially. So Davre va'ayle legan Eden. So Eliyahu took Rabbi Baravua to Gan Eden. Amrle pshok take off your coat. Sifi shekol mahani tarfe, and take some of these leaves. Safa shakal. So he collected some of the leaves. Kihava nafik, when he was ready to go, Shama de Kamer, he heard people saying, Man ka'achela alme karabba baravua. Who's consuming his reward in the world to come, like Rabba Baravua? Nafat shidanu. So as a result, he realized, I better not take all this stuff. So he threw all the leaves away. Afilu haki asya leglime. Nonetheless, when he came back with his cloak, Sacha glima recha. It was soaked in this wonderful fragrance. Zabne betresar alfe dinare. And so he was able to sell the cloak for 12,000 dinar. Plaginhu say. And he gave it all to his sons-in-law because, again, he didn't want to benefit from Olam Haba at all. So Tanarabanan. So ish anihu los ishka ba'avoto. So back to the taking of security issues. If a person's poor, don't lie down with his security.
I'm not sure I understand the end of the story. I would have thought that if Eliyahu took them there, he would have taught him the other two sidre of the mission that he didn't know. Now he's giving him leaves with what's the point? Now he has enough money to learn, so he doesn't.
Exactly. Now he would have enough money to learn. Correct.
But he gives the money away.
What he ends up giving the money away because he realized that he needs to do it on his own. If he gets it handed to him, he will not have actually succeeded in what his purpose is in life. You can't. This is the one can say that a key lesson here is the fact that if you just get given something and don't actually have to work for it, then you don't get the reward that's associated with it. You don't get credit. So it's one thing to know. But it's more important, clearly, you can see from this Gemara that it's more important that Rabba Baravua tried to learn it on his own rather than be given it and given the knowledge. That knowledge is not meaningful if you don't actually have to work for it.
But he's giving him the money now that he said he was poor. He didn't have time. He had to work for a living. Now he has money. He doesn't have to work for a living. He has time to learn, right? How do you explain the whole concept of kollels? They're learning in kollel, and they receive money to learn.
Well, first of all, so let's back up and finish because in the end, he realizes that if he takes the money from Eliyahu, he will have benefited from his righteousness. And as a result, will be losing the benefit that he receives in the world to come. And so as a result, he doesn't want that to happen. So he ends up saying, I'm not going to take any of the thing, even the leftover benefit, I'm going to give it to my sons-in-law. I'm not even going to take it for myself. So that's point number one. In terms of how we can then understand what's going on with respect to people who learn in Kollel. So a couple of things. So one is obviously the Rambam was very against the whole concept of Kollel. He didn't think that you should be paid for your learning. But even those who are more lenient on that concept would say the following, that the point is that those who are supporting the learning are getting credit for the learning that's happening. And so it's as known as the Zvulun and Yisachar situation.
Okay.
Exactly. And so even if it's not officially the same degree that Yisachar and Zvulun did, where Zvulun would give half of their earnings to Yisachar, and Yisachar would effectively give half of the credit for the learning to Zvulun, so that it would be along those same lines. But the bottom line is that in that situation, you're not benefiting from the reward that you're supposed to get in Shemayim, because that's really the key issue here. We want to avoid getting benefiting from the things that we're going to benefit. And that's why, when I think it's Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, when they ask for any benefit from Hashem, they ask it as a tzedakah. They don't want it as a reward for what they've done. They want the reward for what they've done to be in Shemayim. So back to their question of security, we see that again we learn the pasuk ish ani hu lo tishkav ba'avoto. So if the person's poor, you don't keep his security. Ha'ashir shchib. But if he's wealthy, that implies that you can. So my kamar, what is this brisa really trying to tell us? So Amar Rav Sheshes Hachikamar. V'im ish anihu lo tishkav ba'avoto etzlecha. You should not lie down when his security is still with you. Ha'ashir, if he's wealthy, shchev va'avoto etzlecha. You can lie down. You can go to sleep with his security. Tanu Rabbanan Hamalba eschavero. If you lend money to somebody, Einu rishai lemishkano. You're not allowed to take away his security. Ve'einu chayav lahachzir lo. And you don't have to return it to him. Now that's very odd, but we'll figure out what that means in a moment. Ve'over b'chol hashemos halalu. And you'll have transgressed all of these prohibitions. So there's definitely something going on with this brisa, because it doesn't really make sense, because we just said the beginning of the brisa says that you're not allowed to take security, but then we talk about having the security and not having to return it, and then we talk about that you've violated all these sins. So my kamar, what are we talking about? So Amar of Sheshes, we're going to offer 4 different explanations for this. I think two different explanations for this, and then and see what it says. So Amar of
Well,
Sheshes.
but this is a contradiction of what we normally do take a mashkanta if we loan money.
Yes, 100%. That's you're highlighting exactly. There are a number of problems with what we've said. Amar of Sheshes, Hachikamar, Hamal ve'eschaveru. This is what we're saying. If you lend money from somebody, Einu rishai lemashkano, you're not allowed to take a security from him. Meaning you can't go into his property and then take the security. V'im mashkano, but if you take security and you violated the law, chayav lahachzir lo, you do have to return it to him. Not that you don't have to return it, you do have to. V'over b'chol hashemos halalu, and you'll have violated all of the prohibitions. And that applies aseifa. That refers to the end of the brisa, where if you do not return the security, you're subject to all the prohibitions. So again, that's one potential read of the brisa. Rava Amar Hakikam. Rava says, no, read it the following. If you lend money to your friend, you're not allowed to take away security. And if you do take security, you have to return it to him. What are we talking about? Shemishkano below Shalo B'Shas Halva Aso, where you take the security not at the time when the loan was made. That's then you have to return it to him. Aval Mishkano B'Shas Halva Aso, but if the lender takes the security at the time of the loan, Einu Chayav Lahachzir Lo, there's no obligation to return it to the borrower. V'over b'chol hashemos halalu, and when it says that you violate all these prohibitions, aresha, it goes on the beginning of the brisa, namely when the lender takes the security after the loan was made without having gone to court, etc. And so again, Rava adds an additional concept here, because he points out to Rav Sheshes, listen, the brisa that we are just quoted references not returning it, and the way you said it, you're always required to return it. So I'm creating a method of reading this brisa that says that you don't have to return it. So Tani Rav Shizvi,
How can it be? If at the conclusion of the agreement, he's chayav to laxir at the mashkanta, right?
No, so the point is that
Mashkan.
if I loan money to you on the condition that you give me your pillow, and the only way I'm loaning the money to you is by you giving me your pillow, what Rava is saying is I do not have an obligation to give you back that pillow at night because I've taken that collateral in at the original moment. The only time that I have to give you back your collateral is if I take your collateral after I've made the loan, after I already agreed to loan you the money and I given you the money, and now you failed to pay back. And so now the collateral is just a method of ensuring that you pay up. It wasn't a basis for me to make the loan. When it's a basis for me to make the loan, Rava is saying you don't need to give the security back to the borrower. At least that's how he's understanding this brisa. Okay, so let's finish. We'll finish up. We'll do Tani Rav Shizvi Kamei de Rava. So Rav Shizvi quotes the following brisa in front of Rava: Ad bo Hashem ulo, until the sun goes down, you got to return it to him. Zuksus Laila. This sounds like it's talking about the night garment. Hashev tashev lo es ha'avod kevo Hashemesh, and you have to return something to him, to the security, as the sun goes down. Zoksus yom. That refers to the day garment. Now that seems very odd because it seems like you're returning everything when the sun goes down. So Amrle, Dimama Bilele Lamali. Why am I returning a day garment at night? Odelela Biyamama Lamali. And why am I returning a night garment during the day? So Amrle, Ismiye, should I? So he said to. So that's what Rava asked, because it sounds like you're returning the garment at night for the day, and you're turning the night garment, the day garment during the night. So that seems to be all messed up, Rava asks. So Amrle, so Rav Shizvi says, Ismiye, should I erase this brisa? Amrle, lo, no, don't erase it. Hachikamar. This is what it's trying to say. Adbo Hashemesh teshivenu lo, until the sun goes down, you should return it to him. Zuksus yom. That's what it's talking about. It says that's the garment of the day. So when the sun goes, basically when the sun is going to rise, that's when you need to give him the day garment.
Wait, you just said when the sun goes down.
I know, but it really, I guess it means Boa Shemesh, even though it says sun goes down, it means sun going up. Boa Shemesh, when the sun comes. Zos Ksus Yom. That refers to the day garment, which is subject to being taken as a security at night. Hashev tashiv lo es ha'avot kivo hashemesh. And now you should certainly return it to him as the sun goes down. Zoksus laila. That refers to the night garment. Shenitna lachavo bayom, because that's subject to being security during the day. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishkano, when we take security from the borrower, umes, and now the borrower dies. Shomto me'al gabe banav. The lender can take the garment from the borrower's sons. Now, ordinarily, if I lend somebody money, and then the person dies, I cannot collect from the person's orphans any metaltalin, any movable property. But this is an exception to that rule because I had extracted it as security. So Mesve, they ask Rabbi Yochanan, one second, what about the following brisa? The Rabbi Meir said that once we take a security, why do we have to return it? Lama Machzirin, the Gemara wonders, how can you ask that question about that? What does that in fact mean? Because Rahmana Amara Hader, the Torah itself tells us that you need to return securities. Ella me'achar machzirin, once you return it, lama chosrin, why do you get it back? One second, but that doesn't. So shalot tehei shvius mashmatato. So now picking back up with the brisa answers that question in order that shvius not nullify the loan. Below yasem metaltalin eitzel banav, and so that the property won't become like movable property in the hands of the sons. Because again, if you can't collect for movable property from the sons of your debtor, the person who owes you the money. So taima dehadrim umashkene. So the reason that that the lender can take the security as payment when the borrower dies is because the lender went back and took it back again. Hello, Hadar, Umashkane. That implies that if the lender did not have it, but rather it was still with the borrower, lo, he would not be able to take it away from the orphans. So that contradicts Rabbi Yochanan's statement that you could take even from the orphans. So Amarav Ada Bar Masna, the Lav Tarut say, haven't you already answered up this brisa because you changed it? Taritz Hachi, you can just revise it the following way. That the question is, once we have to return the article to the borrower, Lama Mashkinan Mikara, why did you need to take it in the first place? And the answer to that is Shalote Shvius Mishmato, so that the Shvius doesn't nullify the loan, below Yasem Metaltalin Eitzel Banav, and so that it isn't considered like movable property next to the sons, meaning that when, even if the sons are the ones who are holding it, because you returned the security to the poor borrower, even though they're holding it, you will be able to take it away from them because it was your security. So that is consistent with Rabbi Yochanan's statement. And the answer is that if in fact you have a security and you are returning it to the person who owes you money because he's poor, if that person dies, you do have the right to collect that item directly from the heirs. And even though we ordinarily do not allow collection of movable property from heirs. And so with that,
how is he getting it back? Wait a second. The case was that initially the case was he's holding the mashkan, right? And he dies. The lender's still holding this, and he dies. The question initially was, are the sons entitled to take it back? And the answer seemed to be no.
No.
Now we're saying the sons have
question.
it back already.
No, that's because you misunderstood the question. The question always was, let's go back just a few lines. The question was,
it says who made.
Right. Thank you for, I got you. Rashi helps us out here. So take a look at
Rav Yochanan Mashka. No,
yeah. I understand. I apologize. I skipped the Rashi. You're absolutely right. Take a look 3 lines up in the bottom lines of Kuf Yudal and Mabet. Mashkana Umeit Lova. The borrower died. La'achar sheheshiv lo es ha'avot, after it was returned to him the security. So you're absolutely right. It's from the Gemara itself. One might have thought that we're dealing with a situation where the lender was holding the security, but Rashi clarifies that the context is definitely that the borrower is holding the security. So the borrower dies after the security has been returned to him, and Rabbi Yochanan says that in that situation it gets taken away from the sons.
How is he able to extract it from the sons? The sons have it back already.
Yeah. So they go to court, and the court will allow the lender to collect it, even though it's metaltalin. In an ordinary case, if a borrower lends money to borrows money, if a borrower borrows money and then dies, the lender has no right to collect from any movable property that is inherited by the borrower's sons. This is a big exception to that rule.
Are the sons obligated to pay the debt of the father?
So we say
if that's would be the case, if the sons were to pay back the debt,
so that's a very good question.
Then maybe they wouldn't have to return the object.
The point is, in this case, they have to return the object because it was taken as security. That was part of the security. The lender insisted on the security because the borrower didn't pay, and so as a result, the lender gave it back to the borrower because the borrower was poor. But part of that agreement is that if the borrower dies, the lender gets the item back as the security back. So that's the
but if the
rule.
Sons pay the debt, wouldn't that
if the sons
still
pay
have
the
to
debt,
return the mashkant, the mashkant?
If the sons pay the debt, then everybody's happy, right? So if the sons pay the amount that's owed, nobody's going to complain. That you're absolutely right. The issue is that the sons, if they only have movable property, have no obligation to pay. they may want to pay because they want their father to be treated as considered a righteous person, and a good person, right? We've seen that over the last
Right.
couple of
That's
Masechtot,
right.
but we don't. But there's if there's no real property, then there's no obligation to pay. If there's real property that's inherited, then we say that that real property serves as a security for the loan, and the children will have to pay out of that real property.
So they
So
would
we
have
will
to
pick,
pay.
sorry.
The sons would have to pay.
Correct, if there's real property. But here we're dealing with a situation where presumably there's no real property. The only property to collect from is the security itself. So we're going to now again continue with our analysis of the prohibition of taking security, and we'll pick up, God willing, from Kuf Tet Vav at the top of Kuf Tet Vav, God willing, tomorrow.
Can I ask you a quick question offline?
Sure, absolutely. Let me stop the recording.